Joining us now is broadcaster and author Mark Levin. Shalom.
Shalom. It's good to be with you guys.
Thank you very much for joining us. A few words, please, first of all, about the latest powerful statement of Donald Trump regarding the hostages, the threat to Hamas. It was very powerful, but many people are now trying to understand what it means, practically speaking.
Well, he's not going to relay what he's going to do or how he's going to do it. He's sending a message to the enemy, and he's telling them, you better release these hostages or else. Now, I know Donald Trump well enough to know that he doesn't just beat his chest. When he comes into office, may not happen right away, something will happen. He wants those hostages released. We know that several of them are Americans. He's very much appalled by what he sees. He's very much impacted by this. As you know, he's a great friend of Israel and a friend of the Prime Minister. And just as the President of the United States, he just doesn't want to tolerate this. And so I think he sent that message to tell them, look, we're going to deal with this one way or another. You need to release those hostages right away. And there's many ways you can deal with it. I mean, I could speculate. Qatar pretends that they don't have any role in this. It's very simple. We tell Qatar, you get those hostages out or you're going to pay a price. They have all these investments in the United States. They play both sides of the aisle, the terrorist side and the democratic side. That's got to end. He has no stomach for Hamas. He's got no stomach for Hezbollah or any of these organizations. I mean, Iran has put a death warrant on his head. If I were Iran right now and I were the Nazis that run Iran, I'd be very nervous right about now because they made a terrible mistake trying to assassinate Donald Trump, among other things. So he knows what he's doing. He knows who the enemy is. He remembers Ronald Reagan came into office and the Iranians couldn't release those Americans fast enough. And I'm sure that's part of what's in his mind, but he'll, in due course, in his way, he will take care of business.
Now, regarding the war, Trump calls on ending the war, ending all wars. But on the other hand, he emphasizes that Israel needs to be able to do whatever it needs. So what do you think this means? What will we see?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. In other words, he wants Israel to win, but he wants it to be over with. I think that's the position of the Israeli government, actually, and the Israeli people, too. The current regime, the Biden, Harris, Blinken, Sullivan regime, has in many ways handicapped Israel. This would have been over much faster. They're boycotting them, withholding weapons that were already approved by Congress, which is unconstitutional. And I think that Donald Trump would deal with this very differently. You can see how they're moving as many weapons into Ukraine as possible while they're withholding weapons from Israel that's already been passed. I don't think it's going to work that way. If I had to predict, my prediction is he will say to the Israeli government, again, I'm just predicting, what do you need? Let's get this over with. We need to get peace in the region. I want to get the Saudis involved. I want to resolve these issues as much as possible. And I think you can at least look at this pretty clearly through the people he's appointed. I mean, you look at who he's appointed as his national security advisor. Is a very strong pro-American, pro-Israel, battle combat veteran, Green Beret. Mike Waltz, member of the House of Representatives. You can see the deputies that he's appointed. These are all friends of mine. You can see the ambassador he's appointing, who's just fantastic, Huckabee. You can also see some of the other people he's appointing over at state. And so I think it's pretty clear that he would like peace with Lebanon. He would like peace in other parts of the Middle East, that there are these so-called Gulf state, Abraham Accord Arab countries or so-called moderate Arab countries that really secretly are rooting for Israel against Iran and so forth. I think he knows all that. But I will tell you something. I think I only told one other media outlet, and that is when he got the Republican nomination, and I sent Donald Trump a text congratulating them. He sent me a text back thanking me and saying, and by the way, Mark, I will protect Israel, quote unquote. And I know that's what he believes. Now, there's going to be pressures in the administration, outside the administration, this whole notion of a two-state solution, whatever that means, and so forth and so on. So there are going to be those kinds of issues going on. I mean, they go on in Israel, not to the extent they used to, but they do. And they'll probably go on here to some extent. I am fully against it in every respect. But we'll see how this plays out. It's just, I think the Israeli people And you folks need to know that it's a new day, that there's a new president, that he's demonstrated in his first 4 years where his support lies. And while he may not do everything exactly the way some people want him to do it, his instincts, his beliefs, his principles are those that are embraced by the Israeli people, and I think the Israeli government. And so I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
We heard Minister Smotrich defining 2025 as the year of sovereignty in Judea and Samaria following Trump's victory. We hear others saying that it's better to keep quiet and refrain from declarations and defining expectations.
Again, I'm not an official spokesman for President Trump. I'm one of the few people who is not looking for a job in the United States government. I like what I'm doing. Now, that said, I think people do need to tamp down a little bit their own projections on what they think is going to happen. I love the sentiments that he talks about, because I'm a big believer in Judea and Samaria. I mean, that's our ancestral homeland. That's the birthplace of Judaism. I don't think it should be all that controversial, even though apparently it is. I don't believe there is a West Bank of Jordan. If anything, there's an East Bank of Israel. That is Judea and Samaria. But, there'll be some, I suspect, pressure, counter forces involved, particularly from Saudi Arabia, some of these other Arab countries, I'm guessing, maybe even within the administration in some circles, but we'll see how that plays out. I think, at least from my point of view, how in the world could there be two states? That's two states. That's the final solution. It's not a solution to anything else. And what would this other state look like? Do they get their own air force? Can they put missile systems in? I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. You see what Hezbollah has done when they conquered Lebanon. You see what Hamas did when they took over Gaza. I mean, there's been absolutely no evidence, no experience, even recent historical experience, that the quote unquote Palestinian authorities have any desire for any kind of peace whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the leaders of these entities, whether it is Hamas or whether it's Fatah or whether it is whatever they call themselves, these are thugs, these are terrorists, these are murderers, and the way they stay in power is not through democracy. It's not through Western values. It's through the iron fist. And so I just think it would be suicidal to create this phony country or nation or whatever you want to call it, and then pretend that you'd be able to limit its capacity for doing harm. I think October 7th just disproved all the BS over all the decades about whether it's Oslo or anything else over these accords, which are fanciful. They're absolutely fanciful.
Now, you mentioned the final solution. Let's really relate to anti-Semitism. How concerned and even frightened are you when you see the situation in the United States?
It's terrible. And I've been one of the leading voices, whether it's on TV or radio or a digital platform, saying that we have in this country, what I call Islamo-Nazis, really jihadists who are carrying the flags of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, right down the middle of our main streets in New York and other major cities. They're not even talking about quote unquote Palestinians, the amorphous phrase for the Palestinian population. No, they're carrying the flags of the terrorist organizations. And these terrorist organizations, as I point out in our country, they not only want the complete evisceration of the Jewish people in Israel and everywhere else, they want the destruction of the United States. They want the destruction of the Christian faith. I mean, in many ways, this is the second Muslim crusade, is what I call it. That doesn't mean all Muslims. I'm just saying that when you look around Europe, when you look at London, country of England, when you look at Paris and the country of France, when you look at what's taking place in these smaller European countries, you saw what took place in Amsterdam, that is a direct result of the weakness of Western nations, particularly in Europe, allowing massive migration, a lack of assimilation into Western culture. And so you have these radical, dangerous elements where Jews are no longer safe. And quite frankly, the indigenous populations of these countries aren't safe either. You see what took place, as a matter of fact, in Germany. So it's happening all over Europe, and it's happening in our country. Now, in our country, The current regime has done almost nothing about it. Almost nothing about it. There are plans underway, as I understand it, to deal with it in the United States. First and foremost, this foreign funding, whether it comes from Hamas or Iran or Qatar and communist China, as a matter of fact, funding these movements, funding these elements. We know what these organizations are. They are on our campuses. Students for Justice of Palestine is really a front group. CAIR, C-A-I-R, which claims it's the biggest civil rights organization for Muslims. That's funny because nobody voted for them. They were created by Hamas in Philadelphia in a meeting where the FBI was actually bugging the conference room and picked up what they were doing. They have a presence, a big presence in the United States. All these groups are here. They're funded here. We have colleges and universities where they're getting funded by state and local funds and federal funds in this country. That needs to be addressed. We have people here on student visas who should be deported because they're associated with terrorist causes and terrorist organizations. It's my understanding that there's going to be a lot of ratcheting down on this once the Trump administration controls the Department of Justice or immigration system and all the rest of it. I mean, that's something that I'm going to be pushing for and have been pushing for, as a matter of fact. So in this country, it's very bad. I will remind the folks in Israel that we have a federal order that was put in place before Donald Trump left office that gave Jewish students on college campuses the right to sue the college campuses and these organizations under a half-century-old civil rights law that had never been applied before to anti-Semitism in Jews. And Donald Trump signed an executive order and applied it to anti-Semitism in Jews. And you have lawsuits going on in this country by some great lawyers challenging these universities and challenging these organizations. And I think you're going to see a lot more than that. The Biden regime gave lip service to anti-Semitism. They really didn't lift a finger to fight it. Every time they would mention what was taking place against Jewish students, they always talked about Islamophobia, as if something was being done to Muslim students on some systemic or grand scale, or somebody's funding all these activities against them, which was, of course, nonsense. They also had special pleaders in the current administration for Iran, going all the way up to the Secretary of State's office when they appointed this envoy who had connections to the regime in Iran, and who had people around him who were feeding and receiving information from the foreign minister of Iran. Really horrific things going on. And we have a lot of, quite frankly, anti-Semites in the State Department, as we did during the course of World War II, that prevented Jews from escaping the Holocaust to come to the United States. They sent them back to the gas chambers. There is this element in our bureaucracy that is dug in, that is enshrined, especially at state and entities like that, that have persisted for decades. So these are things that we know exist. These are things that I'm going to continue to bang the pots and pans on. These are things that I feel this administration, really more than any prior American administration, is completely attuned to this. And I think, by the way, one of the reasons is the president, you know, his daughter converted to Orthodox Judaism. His son-in-law is an Orthodox Jew. He's got Orthodox Jewish grandchildren, and he loves them and he adores them. And he's very open-minded about different faiths and so forth and so on. And I think at bottom, Donald Trump knows good from evil. He knows right from wrong. And he's a very humane individual, despite all the press and so forth. And so he knows this is wrong. It bothers him a great deal. And by the way, many of his closest friends that he's had over the decades, when he was a developer in New York and so forth, and even now, are Jewish individuals. I mean, Ike Perlmutter is one of his best friends. Ike Perlmutter was born in Israel. He came to the United States. He became very wealthy. He's one of his closest friends. Steve Wyckoff is another one, and I can go through a long list of them. So Donald Trump really doesn't just talk the talk. I think he walks the walk.
So despite everything, Mark Levin, you sound optimistic.
Look, my attitude is this. My attitude is pessimistic, optimistic, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is we need to defeat this. You know, people would say to me before the election of Donald Trump, are we going to win or are we going to lose? I said, what's the matter? What's the difference what I say? I'm not Nostradamus. The point is, get off your ass and do something about it, and let's win this election. I'm reminded of Patton. Patton, he defeats the Germans in North Africa. He's moving through Europe. The Battle of the Bulge is taking place later. His armies desperately needed to defeat the Nazis and join up with the rest of the American forces and the British forces. If somebody had said to him, General, are we going to win? Are you optimistic or pessimistic? What do you think Patton would say? Who the hell cares? Let's get there. Let's fight the enemy. Let's defeat the enemy. That's my attitude. My attitude is we keep pressing ahead. We fight the people who want to destroy us. We fight the people who want to destroy our system of government and the civil society. Whether we win or lose will be for history to decide.
Okay, Mark Levin, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a great honor, and thank you folks for being there. You really are like a safe harbor in the middle of radical left-wing media. We have it in this country. Unfortunately, you have it in your country. It's a great honor. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Be well.